Starting over 40 years ago, the Halloween franchise has concluded for at least another 5 years. With the latest edition, the 13th edition, Halloween Ends. This also acts as the end of the latest trilogy in this franchise, which has seen many different timelines, films which are no longer canon, just a whole lot of craziness happening within this franchise, and I'm here to talk about all of it, ranking each film from worst to best. Obviously, with a list this big, there's going to be loads of different opinions, and I get that, but this is my opinion, so I'm sorry if it doesn't match up with yours, but it is my opinion. So without further delay, let's get into it. Around a year ago when I made this last ranking, I felt pretty confident about having this one in last place, and while my opinion hasn't changed, I've seen over the past year that people have somewhat warmed up to this film and consider it maybe their favourite of the bunch. It is easily the most unique in the franchise as, well, it doesn't feature Michael Myers at all, because this was a time when the Halloween series was intending to be an anthology series where it would tell different stories on Halloween night, and it started off in very weird fashion here with the most bizarre plots. I thought the stuff about the masks decaying heads being weird, but then it turns out there's also ties with cyborgs, sorcery from Stonehenge and stuff like that, so it's a very weird experience, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really enjoy any of it. I can understand people liking it now because they've had time to digest this film and kind of embrace the weirdness of it. I'm not at that stage yet, so at the moment I just feel like it all misses for me. While I don't think this is a good film at all, I do appreciate its existence as it's an experiment within this franchise, especially one which is switching it up from the usual slasher stuff. But yeah, this is one which has a new cult following, but as for me, it still sits bottom of my list. Immediately from the start, Halloween 5 disappoints as it takes away a very solid twist at the end of the previous film and just completely ignores it, going in a completely new direction and a much messier one with this psychological connection between Jamie and Michael Myers. Donald Pleasence is one of the standouts in this whole entire franchise, but in here, his character Dr. Loomis is very irritating for the first time. He's just constantly shouting. Obviously, he's meant to be going crazy because Michael Myers has taken over his life for God knows how many years, but here it's just so over the top that it was just very irritating. From a filmmaking point of view, it's just poor execution, and if that's the case, then you expect some entertaining and fun kills, but you don't get any here. The fact that Rob Zombie never wanted to make a sequel to his 2007 Halloween speaks for itself when talking about this film, because it's just a huge mess. The only real standout here perhaps is Michael Myers, as he's a lot more animated, a lot bigger and stronger, so he can be quite intimidating at times in a different way compared to all the other films. And although he is this murdering machine, he is kind of the only real character to root for in this film, as bad as it sounds, because Dr. Loomis and Laurie are so unbearable here. It's like they're purposely made to be really unlikable, as their certain qualities are just so over the top and it just comes off very, very annoying. Like its predecessor, Halloween 2 is overly sexual for no reason, whether that's conversation between characters or just some very uncomfortable things happening on screen. It's like an immature teenager wrote the script. However, they don't stand out as much as the odd inclusion of Rob Zombie's wife as like flashbacks or like visions of Michael Myers' mum, which they're just so random and dampen this film's quality. For a film that the director didn't want to make, it's overly ambitious and it misses all those marks, failing with its twists and turns, and not to mention has some very absurd features and just some unbearable characters. Halloween Resurrection dooms itself from the start by committing an unforgivable sin, spoiler alert, which is killing off Jamie Lee's Laurie Strode right in the opening 10 minutes. After that, it just completely changes course and becomes a Halloween game show of like featuring challenges and then obviously some miscommunication, which leads to Michael Myers being kind of the threat of the game show. Overall, the film is cheesy and not in a good way because, you know, you have a very goofy Michael Myers and characters which all kind of stem from that really poor plotline. You can tell it's a plotline for its time, but it hasn't aged too well. It's common for long-running horror franchises to stem into ridiculousness, but most of them still serve some kind of purpose, whether that's enjoyable kills or what, but here there's nothing to appreciate. It even drags in the perspective of people watching the game show just to kind of make sure that this does reach 90 minutes, which it barely does. So after return to form with its previous entry, this was such a disappointing film. To clarify, I watched the producer's cut for this film, which is supposedly a much clearer and better made movie than the theatrical release. But still, at the end of the day, it's not improving much because there's not too much good quality here. Besides Halloween 3, Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers strays the furthest from the Halloween template that we've ever seen, reintroducing the Man in Black mystery from a few movies ago, and just kind of makes Michael full-on supernatural, involves a cult, and just a whole lot of strange things. I know this could be said the same for Halloween 3, but here, this film is so bizarre and different that it really stands out in the franchise, and it made it quite enjoyable for me. And I'm not going to say it's a very enjoyable experience, I'm just going to say it was more enjoyable, memorable than, you know, mindless slasher adventures which will play out the same. Because at the end of the day, there's not much good quality here to talk about. I may also enjoy this more than others because this is kind of one of the first acting roles for one of my favourite actors, or in fact, my favourite actor, Paul Rudd, who, no, he's not that good here, but it's just funny to see a young Paul Rudd show up in a film like this. This also acts as the farewell role for Donald Pleasence, who's been such an icon of this series, who sadly passed away before this film was even released, I think. So despite this film being worse than a lot of the other films on this list, I found it quite watchable because it stood out and was different. But yeah, it's not good quality. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, quite literally lives up to the title by bringing back Michael Myers after Season of the Witch, and in doing so doesn't really do anything new. The only real standout here is bringing in kid actress Danielle Harris, who she's pretty good for her age, and to be honest, is quite a big character in this franchise overall. I found this one difficult to rank and in fact rate because it doesn't really do anything wrong. Like, there's nothing unforgivable about it, but then besides Danielle Harris, same could be said about good quality because there's not much of that either, so it's very, very standard, it's very dull. None of the kills are memorable, and to be honest, the plot can be quite messy at points, but yeah, it's just kind of there. It doesn't do anything too wrong, but it doesn't do anything that good either. So here is the latest addition to this list, and to be honest, I think this is probably the most divisive film on here as well. There have been both good and negative reviews for this, and to be honest, I do see both sides of it, which makes this very frustrating for me. I think the whole Corey Cunningham storyline was actually pretty well done, and I found it very fascinating. However, you don't introduce a character and, you know, flesh him out, making the main character at the end of a 13 film franchise, let alone this trilogy which has been so focused on Laurie and Allison. But with this Corey storyline, I thought it kicked things off, no pun intended, in very dark fashion, which kind of like shocks you and makes you kind of ready for this film. I found that very fascinating, but this decision of having it in this film baffled me, as they had to also fit in Michael Myers himself, who, I don't know, they're kind of saying he has supernatural abilities, but it's not very clear, and the whole epic showdown with him and Laurie at the end was very underwhelming. This is a very different film than what I expected, and with that, you kind of get deprived of memorable kills. There's certainly gory ones, but none which kind of stand out. It's such a frustrating watch because there was parts of this I did like, and I appreciate that they tried something new, but it was just at the wrong time, and also it was quite unsatisfying as the end to this franchise, even though I think everybody knows that they're going to reboot it in like 5 years time. So this film does stand out as the end of this franchise, but it doesn't stand out for the right reasons, which pains me to say. the record, I watched the director's cut for this film when kind of wish I didn't. Talk about that a bit later on. But Rob Zombie's remake of the classic horror film is pointless, as other than a first half which focuses on Michael's childhood and origin, it copies the original beat by beat and doesn't really change anything. Now I know you can say, oh, that whole first half of the film is it's a reason to make this reboot, but for me, showing Michael's full-on origin and stuff from his point of view kind of takes away his intimidation. Having fleshed him out this much, it doesn't make him as intimidating as the way I see him in the original and all those other films. Is kind of like a soulless killing machine, but here gives him a bit of a motive and a bit of backstory, which I didn't really like that much. Now, I talked about me watching the director's cut rather than the theatrical cut, and the reason I wish I watched the theatrical cut is because here you get some of Rob Zombie's unfiltered qualities of what he likes to include in his films, which is very gross, to be honest, and it makes me feel very uncomfortable, and not in the sense that you'd want in a horror film. That is a very graphic and uncomfortable rape scene which isn't in the theatrical cut. That, on top of all the sexual content he includes in these films when they're not necessary, just makes you feel like you need to take a shower after watching this, and it just makes the whole viewing experience quite miserable. Look, nothing's wrong with the original, so why remake it here? The Halloween sequels had made some wacky and bold decisions, and Halloween H2O kind of acts as the return to form, the return to its roots, a nice simple story, once again featuring Jamie Lee Curtis. It was interesting to see how she was coping with the events that had previously happened a few years ago for her, 20 to be precise, kind of exploring what happens in Halloween 2018. While it is a return to its basics, this film is still far from the quality of the original. It may feature some recognizable faces, but the script and storytelling do let it down, preventing it from being higher up on this list. While it's far from a good film, I think I do enjoy Halloween Kills a lot more than a lot of people. It delivers what the title suggests. Kills. Yes, we get a lot of them, and damn are they gory. I really appreciate that this entry tried to do something new by kind of looking at Michael Myers from the town of Haddonfield's perspective, flipping the concept of Michael Myers being hunted rather than, the civilians of Haddonfield, while that is still the case, I guess. Along with other things, this film is let down by the fact that it is the filler in between the sandwich. It's the second film in a planned trilogy, and with a horror trilogy, you kind of expect what's going to happen. There's no real tension, as it feels like Michael Myers has got invincibility because, they need him for the third film. Doesn't feel like any real stakes here. Just a mindless killing spree with not much else going on, which, I can enjoy, but, you're going to have to knock a few ratings down for that. Not to mention, Laurie Strode is understandably sidelined for pretty much the entire film, as she's in a hospital bed following the events of the previous film, and that's another thing where that film was such a huge success. We'll talk about that in a bit. You're expected to feel tense throughout this whole film, but you just don't. Well, at least I didn't. It keeps up the great cinematography from Halloween 2018, but other than that, on the story front, it is a lot weaker. The kills might be more memorable, but there is a weak script where it just felt like they were copying and pasting the same line over and over again plenty of times. You know what line that is. Roll the clip.
Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. All right, evil dies tonight.
Hitting our top 3, we have the original Halloween 2, and to be honest, I think this film gets a lot more hate than it deserves, because you look at horror sequels, like ones which immediately follow the original of a classic, and you mostly see pretty poor quality, and while this doesn't live up to the standard, I still think it's a pretty solid horror film and quite a solid addition in the franchise. We pick up immediately after the events of the first one, and we just get to spend more time with Michael Myers, slowly picking off victims and delivering, while some okay kills, they kind of do disappoint, to be honest, especially given the increase in budget. But that might just be down to not as much tension being created, as this is more of a, a classic slasher than one which feels like it's been carefully constructed. Like I said, this film does fail to live up to the original, but to be honest, when do horror sequels ever? Comfortably in second, Halloween 2018. Fun fact, the third Halloween film to be titled Halloween, even though it is a sequel to Halloween. Yeah, It took a while for my head to wrap around it as well. But despite sharing the same name, Halloween 2018 ignores all of the sequels to Halloween 1978 and I think thrives because of it. It is clear from the start that this film intends to stand proudly side by side with the original. As you can tell, it's been carefully constructed and care has been put into it. It's not just a mindless slasher return for money. Things which give me that impression are the cinematography, you know, the tension that is built, some very likable characters, but also some poor choices. I say choices, but I think the only real negative I have about this film is a plot twist towards the end with Dr. Sartain. They kind of make him this new Loomis, and the twist he has at the end kind of acts as the only fault of this film, which prevents it from being a lot closer with the original, and who knows, maybe it would have been better, maybe not. On top of the beautiful cinematography, the kills here are vicious. Combining with John Carpenter's score here, it's absolutely beautiful. Jamie Lee Curtis's return is once again thrilling and very interesting as they further explore elements which were kind of hinted at. They didn't really dive that deep into in H2O, so it was very interesting and fascinating to see that play out here. As a whole, I thought this was a great film, a great follow-up, but that Dr. Sartain twist really prevented it from being that much better. Like I said in my video last year, you already knew what the winner was before clicking on this video. Of course, the original, one of the most influential horror films of all time, which you may look at now and think, okay, there's a lot of cliches there, but I think this film practically invented those cliches. While Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode is great and a fantastic final girl, the real standout is Michael Myers, who's this soulless killing machine and very intimidating, even though he doesn't say a single word, he doesn't run or anything, he walks. He takes his time, he walks at a slow pace, and he just stays to himself. Very shy guy who stays quiet. I mentioned in Halloween 2018, but the score here as well, so perfect and exactly what you want in a film like this. Such an uncomfortable piano key which just kind of gets under your skin. It feels like you're being watched when you hear it, and that's what this whole film practically is. So such a fantastic horror film, nice and simple. Even though it is simple, it's been proven that it's been hard to replicate, and to be honest, I say this often, the best films are often the simple ones. But there is my ranking of all 13 Halloween films. I'd like to hear yours down below, as I said, because there's going to be some different opinions, especially with Season of the Witch. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, could you please like and subscribe? It would really mean a lot. I'm already kind of eager to rewatch these films, maybe because it's Halloween season. I have to wait for another time, probably 5 years, for when I have to remake this video, adding in, I don't know, Halloween Returns, the 14th film in the franchise, who knows. But anyways, thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in my next video.